All right, let's jump right in. There's this ancient idea tucked away in a text that's 2,000 years old, and honestly, it's stumped people for centuries. It's the concept of being born from above. Now, that sounds pretty mystical, right? Maybe even a little bit nonsensical. But what if we could actually unpack it using the tools of modern psychology? Well, in this explainer, that's exactly what we're going to try to do.
So this is it. This is the statement that's at the very heart of the puzzle we're trying to solve. It was spoken by this radical teacher, Jesus, and it is not an easy thing to wrap your head around. It seems to be asking for a total reset, some kind of fundamental change that's way deeper than just learning something new. It's a line that just makes you stop and ask, what on earth does that actually mean?
And believe it or not, that's pretty much the exact question a guy named Nicodemus asked. He heard it and took it completely literally, Like, how does that work physically? And his very practical, logical question really sets up the whole conflict we're digging into here, that gap between a literal, physical understanding of the world and a much deeper psychological one.
Okay, so to understand the answer, first we have to really picture the scene. This guy, Nicodemus, he was a Pharisee, a big deal, a respected leader and a teacher in his community. He doesn't just bump into Jesus in the middle of the day. The text is super specific. It says he came by night. And as we're about to see, that tiny little detail, it's a massive clue.
Now, what's so cool about this detail is that it's working on a few different levels. On one hand, sure, it's just practical. Night was a good, quiet time for a serious conversation. And maybe Nicodemus didn't want his colleagues giving him the side eye for meeting with this controversial teacher. But on a much deeper, symbolic level, it's pointing to a huge idea. You often have to be willing to go into the dark before you can really, truly find the light.
To really get our heads around this light and dark idea, let's take a little detour. And it's kind of a weird one. We're going into the world of Renaissance art. Yeah, I know, it sounds unrelated, but it turns out that the way painters from this time used light and shadow gives us this incredible visual metaphor for what's happening in that ancient conversation. Trust me on this.
So the technique is called chiaroscuro. It's an Italian word that literally just means light-dark. And the undisputed master of this was the painter Caravaggio. He used this style to create these paintings that are just dripping with drama and emotion. He had this way of using light that was almost like a spotlight on a stage, forcing you to look at exactly what he wanted you to see.
So here's the thing. What Caravaggio would do is he'd paint his main subject, say a person's face, in this brilliant, focused beam of light. But then he'd plunge everything else around it into this deep, almost black shadow. It's that extreme contrast, that back and forth between the light and the dark, that creates all the drama and really reveals the beauty of the subject. And that is the perfect way to think about the writing style in the Gospel of John. The whole book is filled with these super sharp contrasts. Light and darkness, sight and blindness, life and death. The author is using this kind of literary chiaroscuro to point to deeper truths, basically saying you can't really understand one without the other. They need each other. All right, so let's jump forward a few hundred years and bring this into the modern world. Because this idea of a necessary darkness, it's not just some ancient symbol. In the 20th century, the famous Swiss psychologist Carl Jung gave us a really powerful way to understand this same dynamic of light and dark, but inside our own personalities.
Jung called it the shadow self. Now, this doesn't mean it's evil or bad. It's really just the place we put all the parts of ourselves that we find inconvenient, or embarrassing, or unacceptable. It's all the stuff that doesn't fit into the neat, tidy picture of who we think we should be or who we want everyone else to think we are.
So how does this shadow get there in the first place? Well, usually it starts with some experience that causes a lot of hurt or shame or guilt. And to protect ourselves, our brain just kind of pushes that whole memory, that whole part of our story, down into our unconscious. We just deny it. But here's the thing. Just because we ignore it doesn't mean it goes away. Jung said this repressed stuff tends to leak out, often in ways that sabotage our lives without us even realizing why. The novelist John Updike captured this so perfectly. He wrote that we're like these vast continents, and that deep inside all of us are these huge, unknown lands, these shadow selves where monsters can roam. We all have these massive, unexplored territories deep inside of us. And this all leads us to a really counterintuitive, but incredibly powerful idea. If we actually want to grow, if we want to become whole, we can't just focus on the good stuff, the light. We have to have the courage to turn around and explore those dark, shadowy places within ourselves.
What's so fascinating is when you look for this pattern, you start to see it everywhere in these ancient stories. I mean, Moses goes into a thick darkness on a mountain and comes out transformed. Jacob literally wrestles with a divine being all night and gets a new identity. Joseph has his world-changing dreams while he's stuck in a dark prison. Over and over again, the stories tell us the same thing. The most profound transformations happen in the dark.
So, the bottom line is this. It doesn't matter if you frame it in theological terms or in psychological ones. The principle is exactly the same. Our deepest growth, the real work of becoming a complete, integrated person, it almost always demands that we stop running from our shadows and instead find the courage to actually turn around and explore them. Which brings us full circle all the way back to Nicodemus and his secret midnight meeting. With all this, the art, the psychology, the ancient stories, we can finally look at that cryptic phrase, born from above, with a completely new set of eyes.
So, born from above isn't some strange, magical event. It's a metaphor for a profound psychological rebirth. It's describing the difficult, courageous process of confronting all those parts of yourself that you've pushed away. The hurt, the shame, the failures. It's about befriending and integrating your shadow self so that it no longer controls you from the dark. It's about finally becoming a whole person.
And that leaves us with one final, very personal question. We all have those unknown lands inside us, right? We all have a shadow self. The journey that Nicodemus started that night, it's really an invitation for all of us. So the question isn't just for him, it's for you and me. What might you discover if you were willing to explore your own shadows?